Indy, just wanted to tell you I'm wearing your vest today. Is that okay? Is it? Thank you. Okay. Bye. April 14th, 1943. We are in Pearl Harbor. Admiral Chester Nimitz and Naval Intelligence Officer Edwin T. Layton can hardly believe what they're reading. They've managed to intercept Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's schedule. The man responsible for all the death and destruction at the very base where they're now sitting will be flying across the Solomon Islands in less than a week. It's a chance for vengeance. The Admiral will be a sitting duck. In happier times, Layton was a naval attaché in Tokyo. He and Yamamoto played cards, ate supper, and drank together. Now they're discussing his assassination. Nimitz turns and asks, "Do we try and get him?"
And now a word from our sponsors.
Smash the tyrants. Fight for democracy. Join the Time Ghost Army.
Hello, darlings. This is Spies and Ties, a series of World War II in real time, and I am Astrid Deinhard. This is the culmination of years of work by American cryptanalysts cracking the Japanese code. It began before America had even entered the war. The Army Signal Intelligence Service, SIS, based in Washington, broke into the Japanese diplomatic communication way back in 1940. It is codenamed Purple. But what matters most for us is the work of the Navy and the team of men cramped into a basement on Hawaii. That basement would be Station Hypo, but the men call it the dungeon. Hypo is led by Joseph Rochefort. Here he is. He entered the Navy as an engineer and has a very sharp brain, which serves him well in crossword puzzles and game of bridge and, of course, cryptography. This talent saw him plucked from the USS Arizona in 1925 to go into espionage. He spent 3 years in Japan learning the language. Eventually, Rochefort got tired of the infighting between the communications and intelligence services within the Navy. So, he went back to service with the fleet. He was posted to Pearl in October 1939. Before long, he finds himself pulled back into the world of signals and code breaking. In June 1941, Rochefort comes to the attention of Commander Lawrence Safford, the head of a group called OP-20G. Here he is. These guys are the Naval Signals Interception and Cryptanalysis Division. Safford offers Rochefort the chance to lead Hypo. Rochefort doesn't exactly jump with joy, but you see he's 41 and his career has stalled, so he accepts and gets a promotion to commander. His new base isn't exactly luxurious. It's in the basement of the Navy Administration Building after passing through an unmarked door guarded by Marines. Code breakers entered a bunker of concrete floors and walls the color of mud. The air is thick and heavy as the ventilation system struggles to clear the haze of chain-smoked cigarettes. By September 1941, there are 23 men working in the dungeon. Rochefort maintains a relaxed attitude. Officers and men address each other by Christian names and dress standard are loose. Rochefort wears sports slippers and a maroon smoking jacket to protect himself against the chill of the ventilation system. But there's a determined seriousness to the whole thing. The men work in near silence, and the briefing for new staff is short and sweet. Gentlemen, here are your desks. Start breaking Japanese codes. That's it. If only that focus was reflected in their early results. While Bletchley Park is employing cutting-edge technology like the bombs, Hypo starts off restricted to paper and pencil. However, they soon get their hands on some IBM tabulating machines that store data on punch cards. Originally employed to assist the U.S. Census Bureau with statistics, they now keep track on strings of letters or numbers from enciphered messages. The logistics of the whole thing are still quite primitive, though. Hypo has 2 listening stations at Pearl Harbor. Neither are located close to the dungeon itself. So, every 24 hours, the latest messages are driven across by jeep. And the competition between intelligence agencies is even worse in America than Britain. Watch my video about that. Army and Navy intelligence barely speak. And then Pearl Harbor is attacked. Admiral Nimitz and the Navy blamed Rochefort for not providing any warning. But it's not really his fault, because, hold your shorts, Army intelligence had the information they needed all along, as they have cracked the purple code, but no one told Rochefort. Moreover, many of the messages weren't translated until weeks later, or sometimes never at all. So that was a hard lesson learned, right? Now it's time to strike back. For that, the Americans need more than the diplomatic code. They need the Japanese fleet communications. These are encoded in what Hypo calls JN25, because it's the 25th Japanese naval code they've catalogued. The December 41 version is JN25B, is made up of a code book consisting of 50,000 5-digit code groups. Each of these are assigned a different meaning. It could be a phrase, a word, a letter, or number. When an intercepted message comes through to Hypo, it appears as row after row of 5-digit numbers. Then begins what Rochefort calls the staring. Hour upon hour of staring at these sheets. Eventually, cryptographic skills, a Japanese slip-off, or the IBM machine provide a breakthrough. Hypo are soon working through 2 to 3 million punch cards per month. By building up an index of cards, Hypo can sort repetitions between different messages. If you have repetitions between messages encoded with the same cipher, then you can start matching them to common letters, words, or phrases, right? From mid-January 42, small sections of JN25 messages are being read, albeit with enormous gaps. On March 2nd, Rochefort accurately predicts a Japanese air raid on Hawaii. He also predicts a Japanese air raid on Midway. Rochefort becomes a machine. He speaks of little but Japanese signals. He and one of his deputies, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Dyer, here he is, begin alternating 24 hours on, 24 hours off. On working days, Rochefort gets 4 hours sleep on a cot in the dungeon. Dyer relies on Benzedrine to keep going. The dungeon now has 40 officers and 100 enlisted men cramped in it. By May, Hypo is receiving between 500 and 1,000 intercepts per day, almost 60% of all Japanese naval transmissions. Hypo are able to read fragments of about 40% of what they get. And among these fragments, sometimes there is a nugget of gold. The first of these is AF, the Japanese 2-letter code for Midway. Thanks to Rochefort and Hypo, Admiral Chester Nimitz springs an ambush on Yamamoto and destroys 4 Japanese carriers. If you haven't seen the video, go and watch it. Indy gets incredibly excited about it all. Despite his success, the top brass are not fans of Rochefort. He's too brash, too willing to challenge his superiors. He's nominated for a Distinguished Service Medal, but it's denied. According to Rear Admiral Russell Wilson, Rochefort did nothing more than use the tools already provided. The tensions are so bad that Rochefort is sent away from Hawaii in October 1942. Still, the work goes on without him, of course. Hypo continue picking their way through JN25, but it's not until April 1943 when the next big thing happens. At 5:55, on the morning of the 13th, the monitoring station at Wahiwa picks up an enciphered message. It's one of hundreds of messages intercepted every day. There's no indication that it's anything special. It's then transmitted electronically to Hypo. Yes, they finally replaced the jeeps with something a bit more modern. In the dungeon, it is transferred onto a punch card to be fed into one of the IBM tabulating machines. So, soon the machine spit out a message in Japanese plain text, albeit with some gaps. Rochefort's old friend Dyer's experienced eye enables him to manually fill some gaps. By mid-afternoon on the 14th, they've deciphered and translated the message, and there it is. The fully fledged itinerary for Admiral Yamamoto's upcoming inspection tour of the Salomon scheduled for the 18th. Not a lot of time. It begins with his departure from Rabaul at 6 o'clock by plane, accompanied by 6 fighters. Then it details his movements by boat between the various islands and bases through the day, and finally his return flight to Rabaul that afternoon. Here they are, 4,000 miles away from Rabaul, and it's as if they're reading Yamamoto's diary over his shoulder. But they must act fast. Yamamoto's tour begins in less than a week. Commander Edwin T. Layton, Pearl Harbor's fleet intelligence officer, takes the message to Nimitz's office. Perhaps he thinks back to that warm evening in Tokyo. On a visit to the Emperor's hunting lodge, Yamamoto had shown Layton how to catch wild ducks. Yamamoto had been a charming host as they tucked into their dinner. Drink up, drink up. He'd encouraged his guests as he poured the scotch and sake. That was just 6 years ago. That was 37, but how can things change, right? That's when Nimitz asked him, "What do you say? Do we try and get him?" You might think this is an easy question. If you could kill a top enemy commander while they're pretty much defenseless. You would, right? Wouldn't you? Especially if it was a man who had masterminded a treacherous surprise attack against your country. Well, it's not quite that simple, darlings. If the Americans go ahead with the mission, the Japanese will naturally ask themselves, how the hell did they know our most important admiral's itinerary? That risks giving away that the Americans have broken JN-25, right? Any sensible military would then change their coding system to something completely different. That would set the Americans and their allies back years. Worse still, if the Japanese discover that their codes have been broken, well, won't they tell the Germans? Spooked? They might also change their codes, risking all the progress made eventually in cracking Enigma. That would piss off Churchill bigly, and you really don't want to do that. So, the necessary discussions happen at the highest level in Washington. We don't know if FDR ever actually gives the order to get Yamamoto. No official records are kept of his meetings with the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, over the next few days. But what we can be sure of is that by the 17th, FDR and Knox have made their decision. Hello?
Hi, it's Indy.
Indy? I'm shooting.
I have to interrupt you. See, it's entirely possible that Nimitz acted on his own and did not consult Washington at all. Different sources tell it differently.
Like in the war in China?
Yeah, a good analogy, actually. And strange that it's the U.S., but here's the thing. Leighton said back in the day that the decision was Nimitz's all along. But in his memoirs, he writes that Nimitz had approval from D.C.
Okay.
But there's no actual documentation of this.
So it didn't happen?
Well, one of the pilots on the actual mission always said that his orders came from Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox.
So it did happen?
Well, as Carol Glines writes, knowledgeable government researchers and official government historians seriously doubt that Secretary Knox would have sent such a message over the head of Nimitz, especially to an Army Air Force squadron.
So it didn't happen?
I cannot find any concrete record, but a lot of sources say it did happen.
I'm confused.
And Nimitz also always sent copies of his important decisions to another superior, Chief of Naval Operations, Ernest King. And this sounds like a pretty damn important decision, but I can't find any info that King was ever even informed. And why would Nimitz not tell King if he personally decided something of this magnitude? Okay, well, glad to clear things up. Bye-bye.
Clear things up? Well, I do know this. Nimitz sends a message to Admiral William Halsey, commander of the South Pacific area. Here he is. Best of luck and good hunting. Operation Vengeance is a go. At 9:34 on April the 18th, 4 P-38 Lightnings engage and shoot down Admiral Yamamoto's aircraft. The plane falls from the sky and crashes to the ground on Bougainville Island. His body will be found the next day by a Japanese search party. The dead admiral is still sitting upright in his seat, his hand grasping his katana. He has been hit twice by bullets from the Lightnings. And the codes? Do the Japanese figure out they've been snooped on? Well, the Americans make sure to conceal the fact that they knew Yamamoto's itinerary. Over the next few weeks, they sent Lightnings to the same area to convince the Japanese that it's a normal patrol road. They make no public statements announcing the killing of Yamamoto, behaving as if that aerial engagement on April 18th was nothing more than a normal bomber shootout. There is a sticky moment as some of the pilots talked to the Associated Press in early May. Fortunately, furious Navy censors prevent publications. The Americans' public won't learn the full story until September 45. They do tell Churchill, though. As predicted, he is livid that the Americans have risked revealing the source of their information, but the Japanese are none the wiser. I rather unkindly likened Japanese intelligence to a spy comedy in a previous video. Have a look if you're interested. I'm afraid they don't do much to shake that reputation now. For them, it's a matter of pride that their codes are unbreakable. So they choose to conclude that it was all an unlucky coincidence. The Japanese public and the rest of the world finally learn of Yamamoto's death on May the 21st in a tearful government radio broadcast 2 months after his death. Yamamoto is a beloved Japanese hero. Real anxiety and depression sets in, and Yamamoto is replaced by Admiral Koga. Nowhere near as talented. We've seen it in Europe with Enigma and the Ultra Intelligence. Now we're seeing it in the Pacific. Signals and code breaking delivering a real win for the Western allies on the battlefield. Fitting vengeance for that very dark day of infamy back in December 41. If you haven't seen our amazing Pearl Harbor series or want to revisit that day of infamy, you can click right here for that. Here at Time Ghost, our mission is to expose the failures and successes of humanity's past so that we can learn and create a better future based on freedom and democracy. A future where the lives of women and men don't have to be sacrificed to fight tyranny in this way. Join that effort by becoming a member of the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. And then I will see you next time, darlings.